go to our next guest on the program. Liberal MP Tim Wilson joining us from our Melbourne studio. Tim Wilson, thanks very much for your time. Let's begin with the markets. A lot of talk here. Should the Australian government be ready and willing to step in with some sort of stimulus if, for example, the US does head towards recession?
Well, I don't think we should jump to conclusions, Tom. I think we should observe the markets and the behaviour in the past 24 hours. It's mostly in response to the inversion of the Treasury bonds yield curve. It's a predictor. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be what's going to happen. But, you know, I've said consistently, Tom, that I think we need to engage in structural reform. I think that's the sustainable way to drive economic growth, and that remains my view.
On this point, though, we still need to be ready for whatever happens. I accept that, you know, we're not in recession right now. Should the government not be too pig-headed about a surplus this financial year if it means sacrificing the economy?
I think it's quite clear that we should honour our election commitment to maintain a budget surplus, exactly as Australians voted us to do. And that is actually the best thing to provide confidence to the market. No matter what? Responsible. Well, I mean, there are always circumstances that emerge and you have to consider every circumstance, but that's my view at the moment, is to maintain a budget surplus, give confidence to the market about stability and predictability about the government, and support structural reform which will deliver sustainable growth for the economy.
The structural reform, part of the push has been around industrial relations, and you've been part of that push. You've spoken about it being something that the community needs to support. Do you think that the community could support exempting small and medium businesses from unfair dismissal laws?
Well, I haven't proposed that. What I have simply done is advocated for sensible IR reform that takes the community with us. And the way we do that is to look at the existing system and find out how we can simplify it out. And make it an environment where we encourage people to be, employers to employ more people and create jobs, and hopefully lift wages. Now, people will throw up all sorts of proposals, and someone's thrown up that proposal. I think it needs to be stress tested and assessed based on whether it's going to achieve that outcome, let alone the degree of political, whether it can pass the parliament.
Right. But from what you've heard so far from talking to people, do you believe the way the system is set up, particularly for small and medium businesses, that the process of getting rid of a poor employee does put a drag on people wanting to hire someone?
Well, there's always a trade-off between the barriers you put on employers being able to do their role in employing people, and if you make it too burdensome, then they make it harder to employ people if there is a problem or an issue. But I don't think we should jump straight to conclusions. I think we should focus on what we can practically do to take the community with us, to build confidence in the industrial relations system, and to build a confidence with the Australian people that our objective is to have the maximum number of people employed at the best paying jobs so that we can have the growth that the Australian economy needs to support the Australian people.
But that problem, is business telling you that that is an issue, and are you sympathetic to that?
Well, business is telling me there are lots of issues. I mean, they're telling us there are problems with the tax system, and I'm a long-term advocate for reforming the tax system because business says so, because I think it's right, because I think it'll deliver a better outcome for the Australian people. The reason I'm in favour of industrial relations reform and simplifying the system is because I think it's right. Now, yes, business does complain about these things, but that's not the primary motivator and shouldn't be. Right, so you're taking an open mind at the moment, but a cautious one. Is that a fair synopsis? Well, I always come into just about every discussion with an open mind, but I'm very mindful that confronting things like tax reform and II reform are a critical pathway for structural reform to deliver sustainable growth that benefits the Australian community. And when you've got international markets wobbling, and you know, there's no doubt today they are, that we should be focusing our energies on making sure we can then deliver that reform so that Australian investors or international investors in Australia can have confidence about the potential and the benefit of a stable government environment, an economic environment. You're up in Melbourne for the press freedom hearings. Some interesting exchanges yesterday, including the Attorney General Department defending it, admonishing Channel 9 over a story on One Nation and Steve Dixon. It said it just wanted to make sure that Channel 9 was aware of how it could breach foreign influence laws, even though it wasn't breaching them. Did you accept this explanation as a reasonable one? Well, I accept that that was their intent. I don't accept that that was how it was received by the news outlets, or frankly, I think by the Australian community. I raised concerned about it yesterday in the hearings and asked a series of questions myself. I think it was an educative process for the Attorney General's Department to be mindful of the fact that while we have these laws in place, they're not directed at the media. Their focus should be explicitly at making sure they're holding agents who are doing the wrong thing and foreign interference to account, not simply free press seeking to inform the public. Now, there's a lot of backstories about the role of Al Jazeera and other state-sponsored press being involved in these types of stings. That doesn't undermine the fact that Australian media outlets have a responsibility to hold people in public life and responsibility to account.
Another headline out of this was Mike Pizzullo, of course, the Secretary of the Home Affairs Department, saying that the person responsible for leaking information to Annika Smethurst should go to jail. Do you agree?
Well, I haven't seen the document, but based on the classification, in short, yes. I mean, people who are entrusted and given security clearances in Australia should not be in a position where they individually, voluntarily decide to hand out classified information without any concern of the consequences. Now, that's different when we have whistleblower laws in place, when government is breaking the law or there aren't proper processes being followed. But simply because somebody wants to embarrass or create political issues, either for another department or someone else in the bureaucracy or the government, is not a sufficient justification to essentially override national security legislation.
It's still up to a court to decide, though, but you're already saying go to jail. Is that a bit preemptive?
Well, I'm not saying, that I think that. I just have a lot of sympathy for that position. And of course, it's up to the court because I said it started right out saying I haven't seen the document, I haven't seen the classification, but we know obviously what's in the public domain. But the principle remains, and I think it's a very serious one. And I defy anybody to think that if
But does that mean the whistleblower can't delve into the public interest area that a journalist can?
Well, no, a whistleblower can, because there's actually a definition of a whistleblower about what they can do. But a whistleblower isn't just somebody who decides on their own merit and their own steam. They're just going to decide to start releasing out documents because they think, classified documents, because they think that their agenda is more important than the national security of the Commonwealth of Australia.
All right, we've delved into the next area of whistleblowers. We might pick up on that another time, Tim Wilson, because we are out of time, but thank you for yours.
Thanks very much, Tom. Take care.